Everybody just jumped back. They couldn't believe it.
For more than 30 years, he was the face of American television. Michael Landon built an empire on the bedrock of family values, faith, and the strength of the human spirit. From the dusty trails of the Ponderosa on Bonanza, to the fields of Walnut Grove on Little House on the Prairie, and finally as an actual angel on Highway to Heaven, Landon wasn't just a star. He was a moral compass for millions. He was the wise, compassionate, and steady father figure that America invited into its living rooms, week after week. He sold an ideal, a vision of life where love, hard work, and decency always won, but behind the reassuring smile and the tear-jerking scripts, a very different story was playing out. It was a story of creative ambition that often boiled over into total control. A story of deep-seated trauma that fueled both his greatest work and his worst personal demons. And a shocking personal scandal that would shatter his carefully built image, turning the golden boy of television into an outcast in the very town that made him a king. This is how a perfect storm of professional conflict, personal controversy, and a changing industry led Hollywood to slam the door on one of its most successful sons, leaving Michael Landon to face his final battle, very much alone. To understand the fall, you have to understand the incredible heights he reached. Michael Landon wasn't just a TV actor, for a whole generation, he was television. His journey started not as Michael Landon, but as Eugene Maurice Orowitz, born on Halloween in 1936. His childhood in New Jersey was anything but the idyllic life he'd later put on screen. It was a pressure cooker of conflict between his Jewish father and Catholic mother and was scarred by deep psychological pain. His mother, Peggy, struggled with severe mental illness and would often stage suicide attempts, forcing young Eugene to be the one to save her. In one terrifying incident, he had to rescue her after she tried to drown herself at the beach. The stress from all this turmoil caused him to be a chronic bedwetter well into his teens. Instead of getting any compassion, his mother responded with cruelty, hanging his soiled sheets from his bedroom window for the whole neighborhood and his schoolmates to see. He'd later recreate this daily public humiliation in the semi-autobiographical film The Loneliest Runner, and those emotional wounds would shape his entire life and career. That childhood trauma really defined the man he became. It created in him a desperate need for control, a deep yearning for the stable family he never had, and an endless well of emotional pain he would draw from to create some of television's most moving scenes. He found his escape through sports. He became a champion javelin thrower in high school, even setting a national record in 1954 and earning an athletic scholarship to USC. But when a torn shoulder ligament ended his athletic career, acting became his new plan. He got rid of the name. Eugene Orowitz picked Michael Landon from a phone book, and started the slow climb up the Hollywood ladder. His role in 1957's I Was a Teenage Werewolf made him a cult favorite, but it was being cast as the hot-headed little Joe Cartwright on Bonanza in 1959 that made him a superstar. For 14 seasons, Bonanza dominated the ratings. On the set of the Ponderosa, Landon didn't just act, he learned. He watched, he absorbed, and he started wanting to do more than just say his lines. He began writing and directing episodes, sharpening the skills that would later define his career. He also built a reputation for being fiercely loyal to his crew, and many of them, like producer Kent McRae and composer David Rose, would follow him from one show to the next for decades. When Bonanza ended in 1973, Landon was already a TV veteran, but his biggest success was still ahead. He immediately used his influence at NBC to launch Little House on the Prairie. This wasn't just a show he starred in, it was his creation. As the executive producer, writer, director, and star, Landon had almost total creative control. He poured all his own wishes for a stable, loving father into the character of Charles "Pa" Ingalls. In Pa, he created the father figure he never had, and he played him with a sincerity that audiences fell in love with. The show was a ratings machine, tackling heavy subjects like prejudice, faith, and death, all through Landon's signature lens of heartfelt emotion. He basically became America's dad. His face was on 22 TV guide covers, second only to Lucille Ball. He wasn't just playing a family man, he was selling the very idea of the perfect family, and the country was buying it completely. That image, that carefully built persona of moral goodness, became the foundation of his empire. It was also the cliff from which he was about to fall. For years, Michael Landon's public and private lives seemed to be perfectly in sync. He was married to his second wife, Lynn No, and they were raising a large family together, projecting an image of domestic happiness that looked a lot like the world of Walnut Grove. But in the late 1970s and early 80s, at the peak of Little House's popularity, things started to go off the rails, first quietly, and then with a spectacular crash that shocked Hollywood and his millions of devoted fans. The catalyst was a young woman named Cindy Clerico. She was more than 20 years younger than him and was hired on the set of Little House as a stand-in for one of the child actors. She was 18. According to co-stars like Karen Grassel, who played Caroline Ma Ingalls, the change in Landon's behavior on set was obvious. He started talking openly, almost bragging, about his revived libido and taking bee pollen. Soon, everyone knew why. Landon and Clerico were always off by themselves, deep in conversation. The affair started. And it wasn't much of a secret on set. It created an incredibly awkward atmosphere. The cast and crew weren't just co-workers, many were close with Landon's wife and kids. As Karen Grassel wrote in her memoir, "I knew his wife. I had been in their home. She had been kind to me. And I thought about her children." The affair wasn't just a betrayal of his wife, but of the whole on-set family that looked up to him. For the child actors, especially Melissa Gilbert, who saw Landon as a father figure after her own dad died, it was a huge letdown. In her memoir, Gilbert said the moment the news broke, the picture cracked. She wrote, "In public, Mike was seen as a pillar of morality and family values. A real-life incarnation of Charles Ingalls." Then, bada bing, the picture cracked. When the story finally hit the tabloids, the public backlash was fierce. This wasn't just some Hollywood affair. This was Charles Ingalls, America's dad, leaving his wife of 19 years for a woman young enough to be his daughter. The hypocrisy was stunning. The man who gave weekly sermons on family and loyalty was exposed. His wife, Lynn, gave interviews, telling her side of the story and fanning the media flames. Landon reportedly lost endorsement deals, and the scandal wrecked the Golden Boy's image. Landon himself was defiant. He hated the idea that his private life should be judged by the standards of his fictional characters. In an interview with People magazine, he pushed back, saying, "You don't dissolve a relationship to go to bed with someone 20 years younger. You have to have major differences and a deep-rooted need to stop a relationship." To Landon, the public was unfairly mixing up the actor with the role. He famously said, "Hey, like my work or don't like my work. But don't live my life. It's not yours." But in the court of public opinion, and more importantly, in network boardrooms, that distinction didn't matter. His personal choices had damaged the brand. He had built his kingdom on the image of the perfect father, and that image was now in ruins. While the public was dealing with the gap between Landon the family man and Landon the adulterer, another story was unfolding behind the scenes. For years, there had been whispers in the industry about his behavior on set. To many, he was a charismatic leader who created a family atmosphere. But to others, his obsessive need for control, a direct result of his chaotic childhood, came out as a tyrannical streak that alienated colleagues and network executives. Landon's demand for creative control was absolute. He wasn't just the star, he was the showrunner, producer, writer, and director on Little House and later Highway to Heaven. This level of power was unheard of at the time and caused constant friction. His initial partnership on Little House with producer Ed Friendly fell apart over creative differences. Friendly wanted a gritty, realistic show about pioneer life, but Landon wanted The warmer, more sentimental version that we all know. The fight got so bad that Friendly was eventually bought out, leaving Landon with the complete control he wanted, but also cementing his reputation as someone who didn't play well with others. On set, this control could be suffocating. While he was known to be great with the child actors, his relationships with his adult co-stars could be tense. The most revealing story comes from Karen Grassel. In her memoir, Bright Lights, Prairie Dust, she explains how their relationship went sour after the first season when she asked for a pay raise that matched the show's huge success. Landon, her boss, flatly refused. From then on, Grassel says he tried to diminish her value by cutting her scenes and humiliating her in front of the crew. She remembers Landon drinking alcohol from a thermos on set and telling crude, misogynistic jokes. The worst of it, she says, happened while they were filming bedroom scenes. Stuck on a small set with a mostly male crew, she'd have to listen to Landon make filthy jokes about the female anatomy. It was almost like I was frozen, she said. But, as a woman in the 1970s film industry, I was so accustomed to these put-downs, it never occurred to me to sharply rebuke him. She described how he would relentlessly tease and single out certain people as a cold, calculated way to stay in charge. This behavior wasn't just directed at his co-stars. His relationship with NBC, the network that had been his home for decades, was also falling apart. He was in constant battles with executives over his shows. When he pitched Highway to Heaven in the early 80s, TV was already changing. Earnest family dramas were starting to feel old-fashioned. According to then NBC president Brandon Tartikoff's own book, he thought the idea of Landon playing an angel was preposterous. NBC only reluctantly agreed to a pilot because they were contractually obligated to. It was a nod to Landon's past success, but also a clear sign the network's faith in him was fading. Landon got his show, and Highway to Heaven was another hit, winning its time slot for the first 4 seasons. He used his power to insist his friend and Little House co-star Victor French be cast as his partner, even though the network wanted a younger actor. He continued to run his set his way, with an iron fist. But the tide in Hollywood was turning. Networks were moving toward edgier sitcoms and ensemble dramas. Landon's style of television, once the gold standard, was starting to look like a relic. His reputation as a difficult, controlling personality, combined with the fallout from his affair, made him a much less appealing partner for a network looking to the future. The very things that made him a success, his singular vision and his refusal to compromise, were now becoming his biggest liabilities. By the late 1980s, all the forces gathering around Michael Landon. His damaged public image, his reputation as a difficult collaborator, and the changing tastes of the audience, finally came together. The result was once unthinkable. Hollywood, and specifically his home network of 30 years, NBC, turned its back on him. The end began with Highway to Heaven. While it was a hit at first, by its 4th season, the ratings had started to slip. The show, with its earnest, weekly formula, just felt out of step. In May of 1988, during a writers' strike that was shaking up the industry, NBC made its move. The network announced the show's 5th season would be its last and would only be 13 episodes. It wasn't even given a proper send-off. The final season was aired randomly, with episodes burned off during the summer of 1989. The series finale, a Christmas episode, was unceremoniously aired in August, long after production had wrapped. The cancellation marked a brutal end to one of the longest and most successful partnerships in TV history. For 3 decades, Michael Landon had been NBC's golden boy. Now, he was being cast aside. In a 1989 appearance on The Tonight Show, Landon confirmed to his friend Johnny Carson that the series was over. Behind the scenes, the fallout with NBC management was complete. Reports from the time claim that executives basically told Landon they were done with him and that his brand of television no longer had a place on their network. The industry had moved on. Family dramas were being replaced by the sharp comedy of shows like Cheers and The Cosby Show, and the gritty realism of dramas like Law and Hill Street Blues. Landon's moral certainty felt too simple for an increasingly cynical world. His iron-fisted control, which networks put up with when he was delivering huge hits, was now a burden they wouldn't carry for merely respectable ratings. Professionally, Landon was now an exile from the network he helped build. But he didn't give up. He started working on a new series, a pilot for CBS called Us. The show was a change for him, casting him as a man wrongfully convicted of a crime who gets out of prison and has to reconnect with the family he never knew. The pilot was filmed, and CBS picked it up for its fall 1991 lineup. It looked like Michael Landon was on the verge of a comeback, a second act on a new network, a chance to prove Hollywood had been wrong to count him out, but that final chapter would never be written. Just as he was getting ready to step back into the spotlight, a far more powerful and final enemy appeared. The door that Hollywood had shut would stay closed forever, not because of a network executive, but because of a cruel twist of fate. In the spring of 1991, just as his career seemed ready for a restart, Michael Landon was hit with a devastating personal crisis. After suffering from a severe headache while on a ski vacation in Utah, he went to the doctor. On April 5, 1991, he was diagnosed with inoperable pancreatic cancer that had already spread to his liver. 3 days later, in a move that was pure Landon, he did something almost unheard of for a celebrity at the time. He called a press conference at his Malibu ranch to announce the news himself. He wanted to control the story and stop the tabloids from turning his illness into a circus. Facing the cameras, visibly thinner but still defiant, Landon laid out the facts. "I am going to fight it," he declared. "Live every minute, guys." He even managed some gallows humor. "I want my agent to know that this shoots to hell any chance of doing a health food commercial," he quipped. The announcement transformed his public image once again. The controversial figure, the difficult boss, the fallen idol, all of that seemed to fade away. He was now just a man facing an enormous battle with courage. He became one of the first major public figures to speak so openly about his fight with pancreatic cancer, bringing unprecedented awareness to the disease. He appeared on The Tonight Show for one last, memorable interview with Johnny Carson on May 9, 1991. Though weak, he was in good spirits, joking with his old friend and speaking frankly about his prognosis. He lashed out at the tabloid press for their ghoulish headlines, calling their sensationalism the cancer in our society. He fought the disease with everything he had, using chemotherapy combined with a strict diet of fresh carrot juice and other experimental therapies. For a moment, it seemed like his famous willpower might actually be enough. He kept working, editing a first-person article for Life magazine and working on the pilot for Us. But the cancer was just too aggressive. Less than 3 months after his announcement, on July 1, 1991, Michael Landon passed away at his home, surrounded by his family. He was only 54 years old. His death was a profound shock to the public. The man who had been a constant presence on their screens for more than 30 years was gone. In his final months, he had managed to win back the public's affection, not through a fictional character, but by facing a real-life tragedy with a vulnerability and strength more powerful than any script he could have written. So, what is the legacy of Michael Landon? How do we remember a man who was both a champion of family values and a deeply flawed person whose private life often contradicted his public message? The truth is, there's no easy answer. His legacy is a mix of these conflicting parts, a study in contradiction that's as fascinating today as it was during his life. On one hand, his contribution to television is undeniable. He was a pioneer who knew how to connect with audiences on a deeply emotional level. He created TV that was unapologetically sentimental and morally clear. Shows like Little House on the Prairie and Highway to Heaven were more than just entertainment, they were cultural touchstones that offered comfort and hope to millions. In characters like Charles Ingalls, he created a lasting symbol of fatherhood and integrity. For generations of viewers, his work is still a source of genuine affection. On the other hand, there's the darker side of the story. The accounts of his on-set behavior, the bullying, the crude jokes, the relentless need for control, paint a picture of a man whose own insecurities often came out as professional cruelty. The scandal of his affair shattered the illusion he had so carefully built, revealing a man who struggled to live up to the ideals he preached on screen. To many, this hypocrisy felt like a huge betrayal. Hollywood, an industry built on images, eventually got tired of a man whose own image had become so messy. In the end, Michael Landon's story isn't a simple morality play. He was a man forged in a traumatic childhood, who spent his life searching for the love and control he never had. That desperate search fueled both his greatest triumphs and his biggest failures. He channeled his own pain into stories that brought comfort to millions, even as he sometimes inflicted pain on those closest to him. He built an empire on an idealized vision of family, only to have his own family life become a public scandal. His legacy isn't one of perfection, but of complexity. He was the golden boy and the tyrant, the compassionate storyteller and the wounded man. A quote often attributed to him as his final words actually originated from a Little House on the Prairie script, but it serves as a fitting final thought. He asked to be remembered with smiles and laughter, because that's how he would remember everyone else. If you can only remember me with tears, the line goes, then don't remember me at all. It was one last attempt to control his own narrative, to be remembered for the joy he brought, not the pain he caused. But what do you think? How should we remember Michael Landon? Was he a beloved icon who was unfairly judged, or a powerful man whose darker side has been rightfully exposed? Share your memories and opinions in the comments below. And if you found this story compelling, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more in-depth looks at the hidden stories of Hollywood.